A fantastic show. Michael Arevna, V, and Steve Quayle.
Hi folks, Doug Hagman here. You might know me as the co-host from the Hagman and Hagman Report, or as a frequent guest on Coast to Coast AM with George Norrie. If you're like me, you're tired and confused over today's headlines. You just don't know where to turn for accurate, concise information about really what's going on, what's truly going on in today's society. If you don't know where to turn for accurate, well-researched, and properly vetted news, I've got a suggestion. In fact, it's a requirement. Bookmark Canada Free Press. That's CanadaFreePress.com on the internet. It's just not for Canada. It's for news across the world. Judy McLeod, founding editor, has put together a vast array of talented writers like Kelly O'Connell, Daniel Greenfield, Dr. Eilena Johnson-Powell, a lot of guest columnists, very talented writers. Folks, that's Canada Free Press at CanadaFreePress.com. Now mobile friendly. Follow on Facebook, because without America, there is no free world.
It's hard to imagine when things are going reasonably well, just how quickly things can change. But what would it take? Economic collapse? Massive crop failure? Chemical or biological attack? So many situations could find you in the grocery looking to pick up food for your family only to find that the shelves are empty. There's nothing. Don't let that happen. Act today to make sure that if it ever comes to that, you and your family will be provided for. Visit freezedryguy.com to look at the wide variety of survival foods available. Freeze-dried foods from the Freeze Dry Guy store longer, rehydrate faster, are nutritionally superior to, and taste better than any other long-term storage food available. Visit freezedryguy.com or call toll-free 866-404-3663. freezedryguy.com.
Ladies and gentlemen, the President of the United States.
Good evening, my fellow Americans. We now stand 10 years past the midpoint of a century that has witnessed 4 major wars among great nations. Until the latest of our world conflicts, the United States had no armaments industry. American makers of plowshares could, with time and as required, make swords as well. But we can no longer risk emergency improvisation of national defense. We have been compelled to create a permanent armaments industry of vast proportions. Added to this, 3.5 million men and women are directly engaged in the defense establishment. Now, this conjunction of an immense military establishment and a large arms industry is new in the American experience. The total influence, economic, political, even spiritual, is felt in every city, every state house, every office of the federal government. We recognize the imperative need for this development. Yet we must not fail to comprehend its grave implications. Our toil, resources, and livelihood are all involved. So is the very structure of our society. In the councils of government, we must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex. The potential for the disastrous rise of misplaced power exists and will persist. We must never let the weight of this combination endanger our liberties or democratic processes. We should take nothing for granted. Only an alert and knowledgeable citizenry can compel the proper meshing of the huge industrial and military machinery of defense with our peaceful methods and goals, so that security and liberty may prosper together.
You want answers? I think I'm entitled. You want answers? I want the truth. You can't handle the truth. Northeast Intelligence. Northeast Intelligence. I want the truth. You can't handle the truth. You have that luxury. You have the luxury.
And welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to hour number 2 of this Wednesday edition of the Hagman and Hagman Report with our very special roundtable lineup with Steve Quayle from stevequayle.com, Michael Arevna from revelationnow.net, and V from roguemoney.net.
If I can jump on here, sorry to interrupt, Joe. Steve, during the break, I talked with our mutual intelligence friend here. Essentially, what Michael Arevna was saying, and I think what you know, and what I think this is so important because to understand this one part, at least. Because people are not getting this. I got a couple of emails where people are not understanding this. Money is currency is really, as it stands right now, for example, with the new design of the $100 bill. But by the way, it was released, and V pointed this out earlier in one of our earlier programs. That $100 bill was released in 2009. And just, was printed, constructed in 2009. But now, it was just released. Well, why the delay? But anyway, money, not money, but currency is a conveyance of power. It's like an electrical line. Where does the power come from? What's at the other end? And they are at the other end. These Luciferians, the Illuminati, the money the currency, and I keep doing that. The currency, the fabric, the dollars. It's almost like a birthright, and don't forget in the Bible what Isaac's son conveyed his birthright. I mean, and whose image is on the dollar? What images are on the dollar? It's their images. So it's much like Caesar and Jesus saying, "Render unto Caesar's what Caesar's." That is one of the reasons why there's this conveyance, this magical spellbinding power, these talesmen on the money. I know I wasn't the most articulate, Steve, when I said that, but I think you see where I'm going with this, right? Steve?
Yeah, are you talking to me? I'm sorry.
Yeah. I know I wasn't the most articulate when I said that, but you see where a lot of people are still not getting that.
Here's the reason why God and take it up with him from the gold of Ophir. I fight so much with Christians. How is it that the great disconnect? That's why God is absolutely how should we say this? Determined in His Word and gave to mankind just measures, okay? A just measure is ordained by a just God. It's the unjust monetary situation of printing. In essence, what it is, it's thievery by design. Again, I think what people are missing here is there's two worlds. And B, I want you to address this real quick. There's the digital world that all of the thievery is taking place in and on. Then there's the real world where when the martial law and the wars take place, when those things begin to take place, then to the victors go the spoils. I can't say it in Latin, but the point is, I used to know it in Latin. Doug, do you remember what that is in Latin? To the victors go the spoils? What that simply means is...
Sorry.
Pardon?
I said you should have asked me a number of years ago, but no, I'm sorry, I don't.
Okay. Well, I want to turn this over to V, because here's the disconnect, V, and you and I deal with it in our mutual contact with clients. They cannot understand, and boy, V, if you can get this one through, my brother, this is 4 gold stars tonight, heck, 40 gold stars, because there is a disconnect where people do not understand that electrons and photons on a computer screen or a printout of those electrons and photons equal a real commodity or a real item, or a necessary and useful item. Can you make that simple? I failed in 28 years to get that through to some people.
Sure. 28 years ago when Steve was talking about electrons and photons and the way things are, I knew that it would go over a lot of people's heads. You know, I've said this to Steve, and I've said it quite a few times. Steve is about like 20 years ahead, usually, on a lot of things. So when he says something and he puts it out there, it might sound strange. It might sound archaic, but give it some time, you'll see it come to pass. Now, in terms of what a real commodity is this, folks, you have to understand. You got to get it into your heads, okay? Irrespective, okay? we can speculate on a lot of things, but one thing that is an irrefutable fact is that the dollar's days are done. I'm not saying it's numbered. I'm saying it's done. It's a currency that's on complete life support, and it has one foot in the grave waiting for them to pull the plug so they can just be done with the thing. The world, and I can't emphasize enough, and I'm telling you, look, it's not, excuse me, it's not business as usual when you have multiple countries, many different countries, setting up currency swaps away from the dollar. It's not business as usual when you have a nation laden with the type of debt that we have. Okay? We are in a world of hurt. We're worse than the Eurozone. Okay? All right? That's how bad things are. Now, unless you possess a real, tangible commodity, unless the enchantment, and that's what it is. I truly believe what Michael's saying because, you know, the paper currency has some sort of power because people are enchanted by it. They think it has value. It's deceived them. It is a spiritual delusion. And unless people wake up and understand, look, there is a difference between the digital world of ones and zeros on a computer screen and the real physical world where you're holding physical gold and silver, and that is the world where the real power brokers begin to store their wealth and put all their eggs in that basket. It's the world of commodities. It's the world of hard assets. It's the world of real money. The digital world is the world created for you to play in. So you can think that you're making money because you're playing the world of Monopoly, but you're playing it in a digital world. And so as this digital world is falling from underneath you, you don't realize that you're in a digital Great Depression that's manifesting itself in the physical world, but you don't see it because most of your neighbors and countrymen are on a digital breadline with the unemployment rate, with the food stamp issue, with the welfare rate. So you have to have a means to preserve your wealth because everything around you is deteriorating. How do you do that? You have to be in metals. Folks, if the top economists, the top traders in the world are currently in metals, if China, in all intents and counts, the most savviest financial nation out there, if they're buying up metals by the boatloads, what do you think you should be doing? Buying annuities? Getting that latest mutual fund? Rolling over your 401k into a Roth IRA? You think that's going to save you? And the most ironic thing is this, and I've had this conversation with Steve. More gold moves, more people jump in this country, in America, they jump into the gold bandwagon when gold is $1,700, $1,900, hitting $2,000 an ounce. But when it's artificially manipulated to $1,270 or $1,270 as it sits today, you don't want to get into it. And it's the problem is, and I've said this many times, you can't look at spot price. Ignore it. It's irrelevant. It's an artificial number. You got to get the physical. So the typical American buys high and sells low. They freak out. Oh man, my metal's taking a beating. Sit tight. Your dollar has taken a worse beating. In fact, your dollar has lost 98% of its value. And here I am trying to tell you that it's going to lose the next 2%, and people are looking at me and saying, how's that possible? Folks, you have to deliver yourself from the entanglements of this talisman currency that we have. And that's the key. There's no other way to look at it. Unless you have a tangible commodity, you are in a world of erosion, and your wealth will erode with it. Simple as that.
Well, that's as succinct as I know. And again, forgive me, as you know, V, and thank you for explaining that to people, because again, most people don't understand the word wasting. And well, terrorism, and I believe that what we are undergoing in this nation is the purest expression of financial terrorism. I'm convinced that they don't want just part of it, they being the Luciferians, Illuminati, the globalists. They want it all. A fascinating story came out this week, Doug, and it was near to my heart because it was about the Nazi treasures, almost $1.6 billion in artwork. I'll tell you what I've learned over the years. I used to know the man and I won't use his name, but he was an amazing man, may still be alive, but he had the largest Manet collection of known Manets in existence, obviously a French, not Monet, but Manet. And what I learned just from him in the short period of time that was available to spend with him on my multiple trips to Dallas for a number of years is that when you get into the esoteric ether of high-dollar art, and when I'm talking about high-dollar art it starts at $10 million and goes up from there. Nobody would have thought when Andy Warhol was alive that any of his paintings would be selling for $105 million. So what's fascinating to me is the great art that is being acquired. Now, people ask me all the time, and this is just a little snippet of information. I had a call today from a guy wanting to know if he should buy diamonds. I said, absolutely not, unless you can afford something in the upwards of 2 carats, deep flawless, and GIA certificated. And the higher up in carats, and obviously the better pedigree on your GIA certificate, Gemological Institute of America, that's what the big boys are buying. Well, what Via's just said, in a nutshell, is what everybody in the world of big bucks is doing. A friend of mine is probably one of the most gifted car traders. I got to get a story in on cars. The man he has a keen sense of buying, whether it's old Corvettes or old 57 Chevys, anything old Mopar stuff, old Dodge Roadrunners, etc. And the man he doesn't have a green thumb, he's got a 8,000 horsepower thumb. And he just returned from one of the big auctions. He said, Steve, I've never seen a frenzy of so many people with big money trying to outbid. He said it was almost like his words, last-ditch effort to offload the money. Now, I'm talking to you guys about cars that go upwards of any place from $250,000 to, $1 million. I'm talking about the one-of-a-kinds and first years and all that stuff. But he said they were standing in line to try and outbid each other, and the phones are ringing. That's just a little microcosm. So what V just said is this. People that are holding something that they know intrinsically is worthless are trying to get rid of as much of the worthlessness as possible. That's exactly what China has done, and that's exactly what the BRICS are doing, and that's exactly what people don't understand. Our first quarter in January, we're going to have $1 trillion deficit for the first month. My guess is it'll double before the month's out. But the point being, Doug, and this is what we're trying to get across to everybody, there is a virtual world. And I'd like to ask you this question right now. Michael, are you familiar enough with Bitcoin to explain what it is?
Well, not really. I mean, I've looked into it. I actually ran a story on my site months ago, and I was just kind of impressed with it because I had encountered something very similar in this virtual world called Second Life, where they had their own currency called Liberty Dollars, and you could actually make money with that. I mean, there was a 12-year-old girl who basically made jewelry in that environment, and she made over $150,000. But the point was, I was really interested in this currency, and it actually hit the bank's radar because you could actually launder money through this electronic currency. So I had my eye on Bitcoin, but to be honest, I learned a lot about Bitcoin from V afterward.
V, will you explain it to people because it doubled? Didn't it go up to $900 yesterday?
Yeah, it went up to 900, and what's happening with Bitcoin right now? I think there's a lot of speculators jumping on, and there's no foundational. And I actually wrote an article on RogueMoney.net called "Bitcoin versus Gold: The Truth." And Bitcoin, and ever since I wrote my first Bitcoin article for my series, Off the Grid Finance, how to navigate in the world that we're living in today, off the grid, basically under the radar. And I put an article on Bitcoin, and the thing that I got a lot of feedback. Oh, you're telling people to invest in Bitcoin? Folks, I never told anybody to invest anything in Bitcoin. Bitcoin is a utility. And that's the way you have to see it. It is a utility. It's a tool for you to transact for goods and services anonymously. It's a great way to do it. If I wanted to buy some survival preparedness items, and if I knew that or if I want to buy some supplies of whatever, that's going to be pertinent to me. If I see that it's something that I want, and it's something that the government is, not too keen with. But if I know if that seller's selling it and accepts Bitcoins, that's a great way for me to, buy and sell. I also wrote an article about Silk Road. And when Silk Road went down, the most incredible thing was they had the owner of Silk Road. He had about $29 million worth of Bitcoin in his hard drive. The feds took it, and they couldn't really do anything with it. I mean, that's the most amazing thing. Because it's peer-to-peer, it's very difficult to hack and attack and bring down at the same time. And yeah, if you have it in a mining exchange like Mt. Gox, MTGOX, and you can stand to lose your funds. But I'm not telling you to store it here or there. I'm just telling you to use it as a transactional tool for you to acquire what you need under the radar. Number one. Number two. In terms of where the pricing of Bitcoin is doing is this. See, the banksters are afraid of Bitcoin. They don't have control over it. They don't like the fact that it's unregulated. That's why you're seeing their lackeys, which are the politicians. When you see politicians begin to act and take notice of a certain financial instrument because they want to regulate it, quote unquote, that's because they're getting poked by the banksters, and the banksters are telling their bought and paid for politician lackeys, hey, do something about this. And that's why you're getting a regulatory fervor that is being built up in D.C. Now, Bitcoin, it's being accepted. It's recognized in China. They actually have monetary recognition in Germany. They're setting up Bitcoin ATMs in Canada. Now, in terms of pricing, it's right now, I would say it's in a bubble. It has a lot of the characteristics in the bubble. There's nothing fundamentally beneficial or underlying that's causing the rise of the price of Bitcoin to when it hit to 900 and then fell to $502 and then it coasted around for the rest of the day for around $620. There's nothing under there except for the exuberance and anticipation of higher prices. That's the only thing that's driving the price of Bitcoin up. And I actually, in my article on RogueMoney.net, I actually put up a chart showing the purchase